Alrighty. So these are our topics for today, and so our four topics also shown on the timeline. This is not the entire history of cryptography. So okay, we're going to start with the first known code, and this is the Caesar shift, and you can just this is as easy as taking the alphabet and just sliding it a little bit to the left. So here we've slid it 3 spaces to the left. It's shifted 3 to the left. So every letter here in the ciphertext, every letter here in this code is going to be 3 over from the plain text. So this L here equals this I. And another way to look at the Caesar shift is you just line up your ciphertext and your plain text on top of each other. And then the next evolution of this idea came to a Caesar shift that uses a secret phase. So you put in your secret phase, 2 or 3 words, and then you plug in the remainder of the alphabet in order. So just with these 2 examples, you can start to see on the basics of cryptography. So if I want to do a brute force attack on a Caesar shift, I just start with these letters, and then I just move down the shift options one at a time. -1, -2, -3, and so on. And it only took us 3 tries here, but it could take up to 25, which is still not that bad. But now if we try to compare this to a code that uses a secret phase, here's the new ciphertext. And we run all 25 iterations of shifts, all of these are still gibberish. So what we'd have to do now is run every possible combination. So here we have to run all 26 letters, and then take those and run it against all 26 letters, and then run it against all 26 letters, and so on and so on. So this would be, this is over 141 trillion different steps or attempts that we would have to make in order to try to solve that code. So to the key concepts, the idea of a secret phase, a random secret phrase, can be very powerful because just with the phrase that's very simple, here 2 or 3 words, you can strengthen your encryption enormously. And then there are also all these little clever and easy ways that you can add in a strong secret phase. So here you just space it out, every other letter, or here put the last word last, or every other letter for the remainder of the alphabet in the middle, and so on. All these creative ways that you can change it up. And then this ties in with our second main idea of brute force, is you have a random secret, and we'll talk more about how to create randomness later. Something that's easy to use, something that's really simple, and then there's this asymmetry here, because on the flip side, you're making the job of deciphering or attacking your message without having this secret, essentially impossible. So in our example, we use 11 letters that are a secret, and it would need 140 trillion brute force attempts. But it's not that easy. So we'll go into now our next topic, which is the logic attacks, which, logic is a way to defeat a secret message. And they're relatively new in history also, maybe like 1400 years old. It was Al Kindi figured out how to decipher these secret shift phrases extremely quickly. And this example is just 10 attempts, and we're going to use an example from the code book. And we have this ciphertext, but there's also a number of things that we already know. So starting with just the frequency of letters in the English language, we know a lot about, another way to look at it, when and how these letters are showing up. And also which letters are generally alone, what are the most common 2-letter, 3-letter words, and so on. And based on just this information, we can with a lot of confidence, decipher these 7 letters right here, and they're shown here in lowercase, now shown here in lowercase. And now we even have more context, so we use more context clues. So this word here is probably night, then the K is probably an S. This phrase here, then, okay, this M is probably a U, and so on. And then at some point we can line up everything we know, and then again use some logic. So we see a word here, say, hey, this could be a potential key phrase. And our earlier item is from a book that does have the word void in the title of the book. So we're just going to fill in the title and the author's name. And it gives us this. We're getting closer. And then we plug in the rest of the alphabet, and now we've figured it out. And that's what we've been able to reverse engineer and arrive at the plain text in less than 10 steps. So the logic attack takes advantage of all of the predictions and all of the patterns we know that are there and predictions we can easily make off them. And a logic attack really just lets us bypass the brute force option. I mean, it went from 140 trillion back down to 10. And this idea is where cryptography all started, and which is now our third topic, multiple alphabet codes. It was 800 years ago. We had cryptographers now began to start to study this question: how can I secretly send a message? A couple things to start with. One, it's assumed that whatever encryption process you're going to use is not a secret. Everyone knows that you can shift the alphabet around, and everyone knows the patterns in the alphabet, and this is based on Kennedy's logic attack. And then also your ciphertext message, everybody's going to be able to see this message. You have to assume that this message and the process you're going to go through are basically just public knowledge. And then there's the things about the English language. We know it has patterns. Now, especially in a very long cipher message, patterns are going to jump right out at you. The only two things that are not known is going to be your original plain text message, and then also whatever your secret random key is. So the idea of cryptography became, this is the solution here, is to get rid of all the patterns. So you're going to use this key, secret key. You're going to scramble up all your inputs, and you're going to make all the outputs look identical or random. You're going to remove all the patterns from the outputs. And if you achieve this, no patterns, the only option now, if you don't have the key, requires this enormously non-feasible brute force attack. So let's see how we can sufficiently scramble. And then the main idea was using multiple alphabets. This started about 1,000 years ago. So with this simple multiple alphabet example, we have 4 secret keys now. And again, they're still relatively simple. Dog, cat, dog's name, cat's name. And the first letter of your plain text will go through the first cipher. Second letter of your plain text goes through the second cipher. Third letter, third cipher. Fourth letter, fourth cipher. And then you're back to, your fifth letter goes back to cipher 1. It's a simple process. You repeat this. And the result you're going to get is less patterns. So here we have the same letter, V, but it's representing 2 different letters. You see the letter A here represented by I, B, and M. That's different. That's good. And then C and L here are representing the same letter, T. You can start to see the dilution of patterns. It's also called diffusion, where you're essentially flattening out the frequency patterns. And then back to the key ideas, you know the possible logic attack options. So what you're trying to do with your secret key and process is eliminating all of these potential logic attacks. And there's an interesting piece about this, and this is a question that was true 1,000 years ago, today, and will be true in the future, is, and by and large, it's impossible to know that you have accounted for all of the logic attack vectors. Now we're going to see more of this in future videos, but by and large, it's impossible to prove that you've accounted for all these. So it's a little uncomfortable feeling. This is a veneer square. It's another type of multiple alphabet. It's kind of a more advanced version of multiple alphabets, but it was set up with, it's got a key here. It was still simple. It was still easy to use, and it would create a lot more alphabets and then eliminated a substantial amount of patterns. And again, the idea was to remove the logic attack options and then force the adversary to use this enormously infeasible brute force option. So now we're going to go to the Enigma, which was the climax or the pinnacle of mechanical cryptography. And the Enigma was pre-computer, pre-internet scrambling. So what you would do is you had a keyboard, you would push your plain text key, and inside the Enigma does all the scrambling, same as the last example we looked at, and then this light bulb would show up and it would be showing you your ciphertext. And we're going to watch a quick video on how this worked, but first just know that the Enigma had between 3 to 5 rotors on top. How many rotors and what their settings was, this was part of your secret key essentially. This is a secret setting. And then there was a plug board on the bottom front of the Enigma. This was another piece of your secret. You could plug certain letters together. So now we're going to go on to the video and watch about the Enigma.
Let's take a closer look at each step. Electricity flows from the battery to the bottom and then middle tab on the switch for the letter X. Then it goes directly to the plug board, and in this case there's nothing plugged in for the letter X, so it comes back out as the letter X, up the side and into the input wheel, then through 3 rotors, the reflector, and then back through the rotors again, changing letters at each step of the way. What started as the letter X is now the letter K. Now we come back to the plug board for the second time. The letter K is swapped with a C. So in through the letter K, through the cord, and then out for the letter C. Then travels from the plug board back to the middle tab on the letter C key switch. Remember, we started as the letter X, but then came back in as the letter C. Then it goes out the wire of the top tab and up to the letter C light bulb. Then the current flows through the metal light bulb plate to this tiny wire which connects back to the battery. This completes our circuit. As soon as the key is released, no more circuit and the light bulb turns off. So just to recap, once a key is pressed, electricity goes from the battery to whichever key switch was pressed, then the plug board, rotors, then back to the plug board, then the key switch for our new scrambled letter, then the corresponding light bulb, and then back to the battery. The letter is changed 7 times at the rotors, and then possibly 2 more times at the plug board. Remember that the letter isn't always changed when it goes to the plug board. Okay, the electric circuit was the hard part of the video. If you made it this far, we're doing good, but there's a little bit more that I want to show you. Each time a key is pressed, you'll notice that at least one of these 3 rotors will turn. Press a key, rotor turns. Press a key, rotor turns. This means that if you press a key twice, you'll get 2 different letters. In fact, if you keep pressing the same letter, a different light turns on every time. This is what made Enigma so powerful. The code was always changing, so it was hard to predict which letters were going to come out. The way these rotors spin is completely mechanical. No electricity needed for this. Even if the battery was taken out, pressing one of these keys would still turn the rotor. On the bottom of the machine is a large metal plate called the actuator bar. It works like a seesaw or a teeter-totter. Pressing any of the keys pushes it down on this side, which pushes it up on the other side. Around the back side is where the magic happens. This uses a ratchet and pawl mechanism. This is the ratchet gear, and this small piece is the pawl. When the pawl is pushed up, it spins the rotor and then comes back down. You can see how this would spin it in only one direction. This up and down motion will keep spinning the rotors, one slot each time. The next two rotors work a little different. Let's take a look at the second one. Most of the time, the pawl can't make contact with the ratchet gear teeth. It's blocked by an edge around here on the first rotor. The first rotor has a tiny notch around the side here. When the rotor spins, the notch travels around the edge. Watch what happens when it comes up again on the other side. The pawl will fit right into the notch and the second rotor is allowed to spin, but just once. The next time it will be blocked again and only the first rotor is allowed to spin. That edge on the first rotor has to go all the way around before the second rotor is allowed to spin again. This will happen once every 26 key presses. The same thing with the third rotor. There's another edge on the second rotor that has to go all the way around before the third one is allowed to spin. Last but not least, we have the three levers on the very back with index wheels at the very end. They ride along the outside of the rotor.
Okay, and we're back. So let's walk through the scrambling process in the Enigma. We have the plain text first goes through a plug board. You have letters on the plug board that may or may not switch. After that, it's going to pass through 3 of the 5, maybe all 5 possible rotors. Each rotor is going to be at a secret position. Comes out of the rotors, and it's going to pass through the plug board one more time. So what we get after all of this is a highly scrambled alphabet for your cipher number 1. And after you release the keyboard button, when you push the keyboard, you release it to get your first letter, that activates this rotor rotation. So we're just going to assume now that we've just got one rotor that's moving, and these are all just going to shift 1. So now, what this results in now for your second letter, before you push the keyboard, you have a completely new scrambled arrangement. So now you're going to push your next second plain text letter, and you're going to be using cipher 2 here. Then there's another shift. You get a whole new arrangement again, and now when you push the third letter, you're using cipher 3, and this goes on and on and on, and what you end up with is a minimum of almost 18,000 minimum of 18,000 different alphabets. And you can also use all 5 rotors, put rotors in different slots. There was a lot of ways to remove the patterns. But the Enigma is still, it's just a multiple alphabet approach. It's just another example of, it's easy to implement. The 3 to 5 rotor, starting position, the letter plugs, that was all what your key was. And then this gave you elimination of logic attack vectors and forced your opponent to the sufficiently enormous brute force requirement. The Enigma was cracked during World War II by Alan Turing, and one of the German communication the German communications were starting to set patterns, as their operators were starting to set patterns. Not the German Navy. This was just a German Army problem. But we are going to focus on this piece here, just the secret keys. So the Germany frontline operators, these guys were exhausted, sleep deprived, hungry. They started to use keys that were very predictable, and sending these keys in ways that were very predictable. They'd broadcast the same code settings. They'd have to do this on a routine basis, but instead of just pushing the code setting once, which is what they were supposed to do, just to be sure the other person was aware that this was a code setting input, they pushed it 3 times. And just that small act created a repetitious pattern. So now this takes us all the way back to our problem, the start of our problem, how to send a message between 2 people that only 2 people could read. And we've covered this process where we use a known process, we have a secret key, we have to scramble the plain text to get rid of all the patterns, and then we take the cipher message, which anyone can view, and we get the cipher message to the recipient. But all parties have to start with the same key. So a quick digression. There are other options. Back in the Roman days, they would shave someone's head, tattoo a message, let him grow his hair out, and then send him on his way. Or the microdots became infamous in the Cold War. But we're just going to focus on the methods that require a secret key. And this is known as the key exchange problem. Alice has to make a key. She has to make a key. Then she has to make a copy of it. And then Alice and her key have to travel all the way to Bob, look him in the eye, and say, "Here's my key." And then Alice goes back to wherever she came from, and now they each have their secret key. So I won't get into the details of this, but the point to know now is the key exchange is not a trivial problem. So for the German army, it was a monthly task to distribute. This is an example of their key exchange. They had to distribute these keys monthly to the entire army. They had to keep it secure, and individuals on the front lines had just constant struggles to receive keys, to use the right keys, and even just between two people, it was not a trivial amount of effort, and it has to be done correctly. So in conclusion, the foundation of our cryptography in the internet age was built about 1,000 years ago. So one, we have this key exchange idea where we have to create, protect, and then exchange this key between two people. Number two, we have a process where, using multiple alphabets or whatever the process might be, everybody is going to know the process that you are doing. Whether it's multiple alphabets or using the Enigma, they know it. They know the cipher message. The only thing they don't know is your secret key that was randomly generated. This cipher message has to travel. Everybody sees it. There's going to be no patterns inside of it. The only option, no patterns inside of it. The only option to your adversaries are to use this infeasible brute force approach, which is just not going to be possible.